All right, everyone, and welcome back to Nebraska High School game day for our weekly boys basketball talk. I am John Willis, joined alongside my partner in crime, Jaden Taylor. Jaden, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's gonna be a great weekend of basketball we're gonna see, and a pretty good one we just saw.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of games we are looking forward to here in the next couple of days. But let's talk about the games from last week. So, of course, because of the big snowstorm that blew through Omaha, we had a lot of games postponed to Tuesday. So we'll get into the games we talked about a little later. But let's start with the games on Saturday. We saw a lot of the teams that were scheduled to play Friday still had games there on Saturday. We saw, an Omaha Central pretty nice win by 13. Millard North gets a big win. Of course, they keep rolling, still haven't lost a game. And I'm curious to hear this from you, Jaden. Are they ever going to lose a game this year?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people are looking into. I mean, there's some considerable candidates that you want to see in Bellevue West and Omaha Central, maybe creating prep a little bit. But goodness gracious, Millard North is easily one of the best teams we've seen maybe ever in Nebraska high school sports.
I mean, yeah, like we've mentioned it a lot, but just the amount of talent they have on that roster, it's hard to combat from any other team. But we saw a close one that went down to the wire in Kearney. Kearney, their first time allowing fans back in the stands. I watched a bit of that live stream. It was pretty cool to see the Rowdies there getting loud there for Kearney. Papio South is able to come back. They were down most of the first half, but come back, get a 5-point victory. But I mean, Jaden, we're seeing in a lot of schools now that, people are upping it to 50 students, starting to get a student section back in. And they announced today the 5-day class or all class Nebraska basketball tournament, and they're still going to keep it in Lincoln. So this is sounding like good news. Like we're going to be able to finish out the season and have a postseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. You talk to a lot of coaches of being able to be mentally prepared for all this that's going on, and just being able to be smart with what you want to do, be able to keep yourself safe in all of these instances. And I feel a lot of teams have done that well, in any aspect that they can, whether that's at school or that's outside of school, or as well as in games. And luckily, we're able to have some kind of fans back. It's kind of odd, especially we haven't had really seen fans since just about a year ago, really in the stand and really as loud as they are. I mean, you even see guys of 25, 50, and they're making some noise in there
Mm-hmm.
for both sides. They can get some packed areas of some noise. It's really good to have fans back to be able to have that same atmosphere that high school basketball has always brought.
Yeah, I know. Our first game that we're going to have fans back is Millard South, Millard West. So you know that the 50 students that are able to get in there are going to be loud for that one.
Yeah, over there. I mean, it's gonna be a great matchup overall. I mean, especially like that. I mean, of course, West Side's got a great game up against Prep on Friday. Of course, we saw Marion tonight for the girls going up against West Side. But overall, I mean, the student sections that we're gonna have the back and forth, somewhat of, I don't want to say normalcy because I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's gonna go back. Anything really is gonna go back to fully normal, but somewhat of a familiarity that we're gonna see in sports coming forward.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple more of these scores here. I know West Side took down Omaha South. You mentioned West Side a little bit there. And that was a pretty nice win for him, Jaden. What did you see from the Warriors in that one?
I think the main people talk about it really, and that is just the experience of both Reggie Thomas as well as Chandler Meeks. Of course, 3-year varsity players, started off as freshmen, and they came into a really big buzz, and they've worked these past few years, been able to fill in many different roles. Of course, we saw Chandler as well as Reggie, work somewhat defensively last year, and they really gave it off, a lot to Jaden Booth, Paige Nagami, and Carla Brown last year. But now they've really taken over this team with a really young core and a big win up against Papillion La Vista, their first top 10 win of this season. And Papillion La Vista is still looking for their first top 10 win as they go into this week. Another thing to look at, not too serious, but Tate Adivati, of course, Westside's leading scorer, was a little bit hesitant in that game. He was out up against Omaha South, is dealing with some ankle injuries. But talking with Coach Simons, they want to see him in more. They don't know if he'll be quite ready to start, but especially going up against Prep this week and a guy like AJ Rollins over there, they need big guys in the paint to be able to win that turnover battle. We talked about in that last meeting between those two teams, AJ Rollins 15 rebounds and a huge night from him just in the paint. Was able to just be overly physical up against a guy that's a little bit shorter than him in Tate, as well as Logan Wilson a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. West Side keeps rolling. They got a big one this week. I know we're gonna break that one down here in a minute. So last couple scores from Saturday: Benson getting a win up against Lincoln Southeast, 69-62. And Benson, I feel, is another one of those up and down teams. They've had some quality type wins. They beat Papio South. They've been somewhat close with West Side, not super close. They were still down by a couple digits, but it's up and down season 6 and 7. I think they've been doing pretty good this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a back and forth when you want to see that team overall. And at the end of the day, it really comes down, to one single player on that team. It comes down to Marcus Shakir. I mean, he averages 22.5 points a game. He's really the entirety of that offense. You see a couple guys working in there a little bit as seniors, but Shakir is really just a guy that, if gotten a little more of a spotlight, got a little bit of a bigger team around him, could be a dude that is up there with guys like Isaac Trout and Hunter Salas and Jaden Johnson and Chucky Hepburn. I mean, he is an exceptional talent, but it really does come down to the mental game for him. We've talked about a lot with his mental game that's come into a lot of aspects of it. A lot of coaches around the Metro have somewhat criticized, his ability to fully get into the zone when he needs to, especially when his team is down in big situations. The good dude's an exceptional talent. He's got a lot of future prosperity, but when he's off, the entire team can very likely be off.
Yeah, for sure. So the last big game of Saturday was Millard West taking down Grand Island 53-26. Really strong defense that we've seen from the Wildcats. And then, the postponed games from Friday, they got an opportunity to play Papio South as well in a top 10 matchup. And I was there covering that one, and a pretty dominant win for them, 65-48. And talking to Coach Morrison after that one, he and the players, because I've been able to talk to some players as well, but they're just really confident in what they're doing right now. They felt that Omaha North game was kind of a fluke, and they've bounced back really well after that one. And Millard West is playing really sound defense. Their offense, I want to say, is anything special, but they're making plays when they need to. I mean, they had 4 players with 10 points or more against Papio South. And, I said it last one, but I like what the Wildcats are doing.
Yeah, I mean, Millard West, isn't really a team that you just have one shining star that you're going to point to every night. You got to be able to give it around. They do work a really sustainable way of basketball when you want big games. But, of course, going up against, those top 5 teams, it can be hard, to push up against when this team does not have that kind of height. Yeah. They're a shorter team. They work really well, around the paint when they're able to get quick and open lanes. But if you're going up against a guy that's, 6-7 inches taller than you, it's harder, to be able to get yourselves open and clean shots. But I mean, up against Isaac Trout and Grand Island, and then, Papio South, I mean, Millard West was really able to show that they are truly a top 10 team. We've talked about this a little bit, with some of the lower teams, 6 through 10, a little bit throughout Class A. It's been a lot of movement back and forth. Lincoln Southeast, got a big win up against Westside, but it's really struggled, the entire rest of the season up against some teams they feel they should have beaten. Grand Island's been in that discussion. They're likely to drop out of it after that loss up against Millard West. And Papio South as well has really been somewhat flaky up against teams that they should easily beat. Of course, they lost to Benson, they lost to Millard West. And we see these teams somewhat, in that mix around that 7, 6, 7, 8, 9 area, to where there's really not, a sustained position either way.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely agree with that. So other scores, Bellevue West and Creighton Prep both take care of business, dominating Bellevue West, taking down Benson 79-56. Creighton Prep taking down Bellevue East 72-37. And then, of course, we got to talk about Coach Cannon over there in Millard North. Millard North going up against Omaha Central, and we've seen some pretty close games between those two teams in the last couple of years. It was close going down to the wire. Millard North ended up pulling away, and Coach Cannon gets his 500th win. That's pretty impressive there, Jaden.
Yeah, I mean, what a career this guy has had. I mean, building one of the best programs, if very, very likely the best program we're going to see in college or in high school basketball that we've seen here in Nebraska, and just being able to bring in that talent, to teach that talent, and to be able to mature the talent that he has brought in at Millard North is so amazing. We haven't really talked a ton, about, the time, I guess you want to say, before we saw Hunter Salas and Johnson and Green and that whole, group that we're seeing this year. But, we've seen a lot from Coach Cannon of his sustainability in basketball to be able to push, and keep all of his players, up to the mental task of everything they need to do. He's a very mentally driven coach, and he wants to find the challenge within guys to be able to push them and find themselves, some big prosperity into big wins.
Yeah, on our third top 10 matchup of the night, we had three top 10 matchups Tuesday night. We had Papillion, La Vista, and Omaha Westside. And Westside really just controlled it from tip off. It never really seemed like Papillion La Vista had much of a chance in that one. Is that what you saw from the Warriors in that game?
Yeah, I mean, really out of the gate, I mean, Westside was able to pull away. They only let up the lead one time for over about a minute and a half in the entirety of that game. Kyle Ingwerson, of course, was the main guy to watch for Papillion La Vista. He had a really strong start in that first quarter, but really died down in the second and third. And the entire kind of Papio team kind of went with it. We saw it when Reggie Thomas, Bo Chandler Meeks had really big nights for the Warriors, able to keep that going. Caleb Benning is a guy that I really think more people need to see. Just a freshman, got his first start overall up against Omaha South on Saturday. Got a second start on the team up against Papillion La Vista. He's a quick guy. He's a wide receiver in football. He's able to move it around, and he's got a great stroke when he get himself, beyond the arc. A big thing going for the Warriors. They really prove that they are truly a top 10 team. They're not trying to be flaky anymore. A team that has a really big first quarter, then slows it down in the second and can't sustain to get it back. Talking with Chandler Meeks overall with that team is, just fundamental basketball for 32 minutes straight. That's what they have really struggled with so far this season, up against good teams and up against some bad teams as well. We talked about that Creighton Prep game, that Millard North game. They had big leads. They had really big opportunities to make some big upsets and make some noise within Class A. They've really struggled in that second and third quarter to put it away. And a lot of teams, like you see with talent in Hunter Salas over at Millard North, as well as AJ Rollins and big guys over at Creighton Prep, you can't let it up. You can't let off their necks, or they're going to make or force some mistakes and get themselves right back into the ballgame.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And I mean, we talked about this in the first episode, but that's what we saw a couple times with Westside, up against Millard North in that first matchup. And so if they can start playing for, the whole game, I think that's really going to help their chances as we get closer and closer to district play. So last couple scores, Grand Island and Lincoln Southeast in a low scoring match. Southeast wins by 2, and then Kearney takes down Lincoln East. So before we get actually, there were some games today as well that have already ended. Don't know the score from Lincoln High, Norfolk, Lincoln Southeast, and Lincoln Northeast, but Millard West gets another win, 78-40 up against Omaha Burke. So, were there any players, Jaden, that just jumped out to you this week that you were really impressed with, whether it was West Side with you or anything like that?
I mean, overall, Hunter Salas is going to be the main guy you want to see. I mean, just some big nights up against Omaha Central on Tuesday. And he continues that maturity that I don't feel he quite had as much as a junior. I mean, he's always been, a guy that wants to put on a show. He wants to make that emotion. He wants to, bring the fans into the crowd, especially with people not quite there. It's been hard, but I think I've really seen more maturity out of Hunter Salas and becoming one of the top prospects in the nation, much less just in Nebraska. Isaac Trout, got another offer just so far this week from the University of Virginia, a really big top program. Of course, I mean, was won multiple national championships, won the last one in 2008. But, one of the best programs you're going to see in college basketball, putting up a guy that's from Grand Island, Nebraska. And I think overall for Grand Island is the fact that, Trout can't do it all. I mean, it's really hard for that team to be able to find anything else, get good strokes. And Trout just really carried this team to even make them, sadly, even somewhat relevant.
Yeah, for sure. These definitely doing a good job. So let's look ahead now because we have some really good matchups coming up, especially Friday night. So let's start with the big one. I know for you, especially Jaden, Omaha West Side and Creighton Prep. I mean, it's always good no matter what sport it is. That's one of those big rivalry games, and I'm betting you're looking forward to this one.
Yeah, easy. I mean, people can say what they want. You can say Millard West, Millard South. You can talk about Lincoln Southeast, Lincoln Southwest. But I can't put my finger on, a better rivalry, a more fierce rivalry than what you're going to see in West Side going up against Creighton Prep, whether that's in football, whether that's in baseball, whether that's in basketball, for goodness sake, whether that's in cross country. These two teams want to win. They want to take each other down. They know each other very well. They grow up, within close proximity, and they want to win. They want to be able to get that crowd into the game. And this is going to be a big one, over at the Birdcage in Creighton Prep. Someone having a home advantage a little bit, but with some evened out attendance, Red Shield is going to have a big turnout there as well. It's going to be a loud one, even with 50 people. This is going to be a really big game on both sides. West Side, I feel, really needs to start off early in that first quarter. And like we said it all year, I mean, we're going to continue to say it. Play 32 minutes of basketball. Play 32 minutes of basketball and move the ball well. They're not a very tall team. They're not a team that's just going to dominate in the paint every night. They need to be able to move the ball well on offense, be able to give themselves very open lanes, and be able to kick it out to guys like Payson Gillespie and Caleb Benning in the corner that can knock down threes with ease. Of course, Payson Gillespie, a little bit of a slower night up against Papillion La Vista, but really not quite his fault. Had some really good open shots ability, just some didn't quite go in his way. He didn't get as many shots opportunities as we would usually see from him. But the Warriors really need to work well around the paint. Ball movement's going to be a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to watch that one. That's going to be a great game between two really great teams, and Westside's really going to cement themselves as a top team if they can take down Creighton Prep, because Creighton Prep's been really good so far this year. So some other notable matchups, especially on Friday night, Millard North, Millard South. It is a Millard game, but Millard South kind of struggling this year, going up against like you said, maybe one of the best teams in Class A ever. But then another matchup I'm really looking forward to seeing is Papillion La Vista South and Papillion La Vista, two teams that are in that top 10, but we've talked about how they've struggled a bit this year, and now they get a face-off against each other. I think this will be a great matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems to be rivalry weekend. You got Millard North, Millard South, Papillion, the battle of Papillion. And I think these two teams, it's really hard to gauge what you want to see with these two teams. We've seen Cal Ingerson over at Papillion, a little bit of Chase led as well. And I think they're going to be able to lead the way up against Papillion La Vista South. Papillion La Vista South, has somewhat of the height advantage that you want to see up against Papillion, excuse me. Can't put my finger on that one. But I think this one's going to come down to the fourth quarter. I think this one's going to be close. Both have somewhat evenly matched teams, but I think Papillion, can very likely push ahead late in that one to get themselves a good lead. I don't think this one will be a blowout in any way. I think Papillion will be able to control it in the second half and be able to have somewhat of a convincing win, although it won't be over double digits.
Yeah, for sure. Another matchup that I'm really looking forward to. Some other games on Friday night, ones that might not be as close, but you got Battle of Bellevue with Bellevue West and Bellevue East. Pius going up against Kearney, Gretna, and going up against Elkhorn South. So some other matchups that are that could be good. I feel like that Kearney game could be close. I feel like Kearney could find a way to make that close. I don't know what you think, Jaden.
Yeah, I think Kearney has an opportunity going into that game. It can really be back and forth of what you want to see there. But I think, especially at a home game with Kearney, I mean, it's just going to be a really interesting game to see if they can really put up some big numbers, and really should they, be in the, talking point to where they're, they might be able to at least be able to host the first round of their districts, especially, we're getting under about a month away, just about a month away now from districts. It can be really important for teams to be able to get home court advantage in their first round, if not the entirety of districts.
Yeah, so another good matchup that we're going to see is next Tuesday with Papio South going to Creighton Prep. Creighton Prep will be coming off a pretty close game, we believe, with Omaha West Side. Do you see Papio South making that close, or do you think Creighton Prep will kind of run away with that one?
I can't really see Papio South
Yeah.
and the Titans really making that one too close. The top four, top five in Class A have really dominated so far this season. And Papio South, we've talked about it so much. The verb, the adjective I can even put them with is just flaky. They win some big, they make it close up against Omaha Central. They get destroyed by Benson. They get destroyed by Bellevue West. They barely beat an Abraham Lincoln team, who is not a team that you really want to disregard, but should be a team that a Class A top 10 team should beat. And I think Creighton Prep just has too much of a well-diversified team overall, and just that height, that height advantage that you see in AJ Rollins, and then Justin City has worked really well this season. I think it's one of the most underrated guys you're going to see in Class A. I think he'll have a big night, and I think Creighton Prep will run away with that one.
Yeah, so those are the biggest matchups of the next week. Wrapping things up, Jane, are there any other matchups that you're really looking forward to that maybe I'm just missing here, or do you think I got them all?
Yeah, I think with this couple weeks, the matchups kind of what we want to see moving forward. Of course, Millard North, Millard South. Millard South really just needs to show that they can be anything so far this season. They've had a lot of seniors not be able to do some of their jobs. Talking with some coaches there, they've really felt they've struggled overall as a team to come together and make some big wins and make some open shots that they really need to make in big games to be able to win those games overall in those situations. I think really the big thing we're going to want to see in these next couple of weeks is that vying spot in between, that 7 and about 12 range of those top 10 teams in the wild card standings to be able to see, who's going to get those final shots at being able to, host an overall district, give themselves the best opportunity to make themselves, getting themselves to the state tournament. Just 2 years ago, Millard North was a team that was bounced out of the A2 district final up against Omaha West Side, with that, the miracle, the Carl Brown miracle at the end of that game. And now, Millard North is one of the biggest powerhouses in Class A history and Nebraska history overall. But district is going to be really important for some teams to make some big names and get themselves a great shot going into state. If you can't win districts, you can't win state, and you can't be known in the history books.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like we've mentioned, like with these fans starting to be allowed, that could become a factor, especially if you can get home court advantage there in district. So wrapping things up, Jane, anything else you want to say to the folks here before we sign off for this week?
It's going to be a great weekend of basketball. We got another month and a half left of basketball to watch. It's going to be really fun to be able to go down in Lincoln for the state tournament, be able to have somewhat of a familiarity, as I called it earlier. It's going to be fun to finally get some true basketball into some of these games with a lot of fans and just a really packed, high school atmosphere.
Yeah, we can't wait. So especially we got a couple really good matchups this weekend that we're both really looking forward to watching. So we'd like to thank you guys for joining us this week on Nebraska High School Game Day. We'll be back next week to recap all these great games and to break down next week's.